Welcome back, everyone, to the 12th episode of Before the Tones Drop podcast. We are finally able to catch up with Captain Ed Voloshen. Captain, thanks for coming on today.
Yeah, absolutely. Glad to be here.
Yeah, sorry I missed you last month, but we're happy we got you around you today. It's also September 11th, which is the day we were just talking about it before we hit the push start button, and we'll all share a little stories there as well. Good. So I got a good episode today. Captain's been on the department for 27 years in December. Is that correct?
That is correct. Yeah.
And respected guy on the job. We were a probationary officer down at Station 3 for a long time.
Thank you.
Taught Devin and I when we came on, and many others. So
well, you guys turned out all right. So
we turned out okay. So we're
that's
excited.
What we tell each other.
That's right.
Most okayest.
One of those guys that's universally loved by the department too, and I think everyone will be excited to hear your story.
And the other, out of the two that you taught here, one is a universally liked guy, and the other's Ben Moorhead. So you did okay.
You're doing all right. I appreciate that. Before we do get into the couple things, I guess I didn't really pay attention to them, but today, we are recording on September 11th. Not sure when this will come out, but that's a day that's for Americans as well as the fire service. You guys want to share your story and kind of like where you guys were at 9/11 and what you guys were doing, what you remember?
Yeah, Ship, go ahead. Where were you when the world stopped turning?
I was in third grade.
Third grade.
But fully had a grasp on what was going on because we were going to school that morning, and then my parents kept us from school, especially my dad, being heightened, like what else is going to go down type thing. After the second plane hit is when we all knew for sure that it wasn't just a one-off thing. And then you started hearing about DC and all that other stuff started coming up. But I remember watching that second plane hit for sure on TV, but we started at school. Parents were like, nope, you're coming home. And I remember just us frozen in the living room there for the rest of the day, basically watching the TV and watching stuff unfold. But just ingrained in my mind,
I think if you were alive then.
Burned into my mind. And
you definitely remember.
I don't care where you are or who you are or what you were doing, you felt it. Even as a third grader, I felt the pain of that day and still do, even to this day, Before I came here, there's one called 9/11, One Day in America. Mm-hmm. It's on National Geographic. I think it just got released, but I just started it this morning.
Oh, nice.
And it almost caught me to not coming here because I started the first episode, but I was so locked in because it's so well done. But, you're getting accounts from, like, cooks at the Trade Center, businessmen, and then the fire guys, of course. So
yeah, for sure.
Well, what about your dad and your grandpa? They'll be in the fire service. What did you really see them that day or weeks
that
after?
Was one of the only times I've ever seen my dad like rattled. He's pretty even keeled guy, keeps his cool, but that day I could tell I was watching him as much as I was watching the TV, and he's locked in, and just like on at the edge of his seat, and just had didn't know what to expect next, which is not the case with him. Usually he's planned and prepared for everything in every facet of life, but that probably scared me the most is watching my dad and seeing the reaction on his face is what worried me, because usually he's the rock, as most dads in every family if you got one. But that, and then my grandpa, just you could see the pain in everyone,
Mm-hmm.
So
just the surprise really too. Well, not because like Baker was saying before we warmed up here, TSA and boarding airplanes and all those things, it was just like walk in and go about your day. And after that day, everything got screwed down a little bit.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Cap, were you were on the job? Were you working?
I was on the job, yeah. Back then, I was doing tile work on my days off. I had just gotten off work that morning. I was doing a kitchen floor for Jerry Vokulskis.
Okay.
Shout out to a retired firefighter there. So I went home, showered, loaded up my tools, went over to Jerry's house. And do you guys remember what time in the morning? Was it like 9 o'clock when the first plane hit?
The first one, it was like 8 or 7. I
7:46
tweeted this morning, like
Eastern.
7:46 Eastern time. So, so early. Or
Central time, 8:46
Central time,
Eastern
so
time.
8:46 Eastern time. So just before 9 o'clock on the East Coast, but it was just before 8 o'clock our time.
So I didn't realize that anything was going on just because I didn't have the TV on, the radio or anything. I loaded up my tools and I walked into Jerry's house and he had the TV on and he was like, "Set your stuff down. The whole world's going to hell." In Jerry Vokulska's terms. And so we did. He and I sat there for probably an hour and watched the news report. And like we were talking here just a minute ago, when was it declared that it was terrorist activity and that kind of stuff. And as I remember it, it was pretty much right away, because I think even that morning they knew that it was calculated, and then the other reports of Pennsylvania and the Pentagon started coming in. And so Jerry and I sat there and watched it, and you just didn't know what was going on. I had work to do that day, so I got busy and we kept the TV on, and then, it's when everything changed.
Mm-hmm. How did that affect, just like, Sioux City, Iowa, obviously pretty far away, but were there phone calls going out saying, like, we don't know what the heck's going on, so just,
from what I
be
can
ready
remember
for something?
From departments our size around the United States, it was like, what can we do?
Mm-hmm.
Like, are we sending water? Are we sending rigs? Because it was on 60 Minutes last night. I don't remember the number. They had like hundreds of apparatus that were crushed that they weren't able to use anymore. Yeah. So can you imagine here with, the support rigs that we have? So now let's say in Sioux City, now you're a fire department and you have 3 rigs to use because everything else was there. It's like, what are you going to do?
I saw there more rigs were destroyed in 9/11 than we have firefighters. Just to put into perspective how big the FDNY is.
They had 121 engine companies, 62 ladder companies that responded, plus all 5 rescue companies, all but I believe 1 of the rescues actually got destroyed. I think Rescue 5 I think was the only one that survived and had to serve basically all 5 bureaus for the rest of the time. But just a ton of apparatus. And then, not all of them necessarily got destroyed, but I mean a huge number. I mean, you can imagine if we destroyed 2 engines, like how far that would set us back. If you talk about percentage wise in department, I mean that's
The silver lining in all of that, I think, was everybody immediately is like, what can we do for our country? It wasn't anything other than that. What can we do for New York? And, I don't remember. I want to say maybe it was like a week or 2. They had a huge public event down at the ballpark, the Explorers Ball Field. It's the Lewis and Clark Field, and it was. As I remember, it was packed, and they had some speakers and some singers, and we collected donations on the way in, did the fill the boot thing. The firefighters were out front, and that was pretty inspirational. Do you remember that?
Yeah. The 60 Minutes from last night, though, that was the 20th anniversary. That was a rerun, correct?
Yeah, that one was. Yeah, I remember watching that a couple
years
I felt
like I'd seen it before, but
they
I
always
think you
add
watch
a little bit,
You'll watch it 10 times. You get lump in your throat.
That one's really good, but...
So if you haven't seen that, go ahead and check that out. Phil, what about you?
Yeah, I was actually. So I believe that I already tested down here and was on the list because in 01, because I got hired in 02. I was lifeguarding actually that morning. I was at the YMCA lifeguarding, and I would have to be at the Y at like 5:15 in the morning, watch the old folks swim laps. So sometimes is the morning drug on and stuff, and it's warm in that pool, and you're like, so to stay awake, I would walk laps around the pool. The weight room had windows that were along the pool so that you could come around and catch the TV. And I'm walking around, and all of a sudden I'm seeing this smoke coming out of one of the towers and stuff, and then they're interviewing people and talking and stuff. I'm like, oh, is this a new movie or something coming out? And I keep watching. Then I finally stop, and I'm like, look for a minute. I'm like, oh man, I said, this is real. This is like a thing that's happening. So then I'm starting to kind of more, watch and stuff, and just started to get some information. I got off from there at 8:30. I was done at the pool. Got home, and my mom had gotten off. She'd worked nights and stuff, so she was in bed already asleep. And I remember woke my mom up, and I said, Mom, there's something going on in New York. So the planes hit the tower. She's like, what? So she gets up and starts watching, and I was getting some stuff together because I was going to head out of town later that morning and stuff, and so I was getting stuff together, and she's like, oh my God, she's like, the tower, it just collapsed, it's gone. She's like, it's gone. My mom's freaking out, and it was crazy. It was I left, then I went down to St. Cloud later that morning, that day, and at the same time thinking, because you had both the towers got hit, the Pentagon got hit, United 93 crashed on on its way to what they thought like Camp David, and it was, if you think about strategic targets, if that's now, it's a terrorist attack, obviously, after the second plane hit, and then of course the Pentagon stuff, that it was, it's targeted. Where I lived up in northern Minnesota, it's right next to Mintac, was the largest iron ore mining facility in the country. So a huge strategic target as far as, I mean, they had, missiles at one point during the Cold War and stuff aimed there, because that's a huge knock to the U.S. steel industry, which you need steel to make tanks and planes and everything else. So it was like, are we a potential target or whatever? But went down, and it was a weird feeling, that day and stuff. And then even that night, my mom's like, you need to go to make sure you got gas. Go get gas. There's not going to be any gas in the morning. So I'm like, okay. So I, went to a gas station and stuff, and it was bonkers. People were like, I mean, jumping over the curb, like just almost getting in fights and stuff, trying to get to gas pumps. I'm like, I'm not doing this. I waited till morning, got gas, everything was still fine. But yeah, it was weird, and then calling my buddies at the ambulance, like, because I was working at the in Evelyn on the ambulance service at that time too, and then calling and said, like, hey, what could we do? Should we just throw in some gear and start and drive out? Should we? I mean, what are we doing? Are we doing something? And and then it was like, it wasn't too long after like the attacks, and they were telling people, don't come. We've got enough. We can't keep track of you. It's not safe. Just, we'll handle it. If we need people, we'll ask for it. So we didn't, but it was, you felt like, what do we need to do something. What should we do? So, but yeah, like Ed said, and then it changed the landscape of everything. But I mean, you looked at how much money came into the fire service and just first responders in general and stuff, and the equipment and the different things that came about. USAR was a big thing that, for our department benefit and stuff that came about. Hazmat, there was a ton of hazmat money and training facilities. But yeah, it changed the landscape of the way we do everything. You look at just the TSA alone and how much more security it is and stuff, and still is to this day as far as going through and getting on a plane. But I will say, and I got, brought stuff that I've held on to. So, Duluth News Tribune from 9/13. So it was a regional paper from out of Duluth, Minnesota. It serves a lot of northern Minnesota. And then my hometown newspaper, Mesabi Daily News from 9/12. And I will say that, the America of 9/12 versus the America 9/11 that morning, before the attacks versus the next morning, so that September 12th, is that was one of the things where the America, like, united, like, you've never seen. It didn't matter. Politics didn't matter. Religion didn't matter. Race, ethnicity, nothing mattered. Everybody was an American at that point. I mean, everybody was, and everybody united under like one thing. It was just proud to just be an American, and like that we're not going to let this set us back at all. That we're gonna come back, and we're gonna fight back and just be great. So it was a different feeling. It was a different vibe, I think, everywhere. So
sure.
I do remember a little bit about local talk about Offutt Air Force Base, like if that was going to be a target.
Sure.
And I don't remember how quickly it was let out that that's actually, I think, where the president went at the time. I don't remember if that was long after the fact. It probably was, but
yeah, I think that was where he flew directly to, was Offutt after he left the school in Florida.
Yep.
Yeah.
Right. But
yeah, and they put him. Yeah, because I can't remember if somebody had said if there was a bunker or something like that he put it, because they have a skiff. I don't know if Offutt's got another. Yeah, because it's Strategic Air Command, STRATCOM down there, so I think that's where they end up going and stuff.
We're looking to our military guru over
Yeah.
right.
What about you, Benjamin?
I was 4 years old. I was being born in '97, and that was like, I have those 4-year-old memories of things.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if I specifically remember 9/11. I just remember the news constantly being shown of the towers on fire, and I'm sure that was on for months and weeks afterwards. That's what I remember. And then I remember a memory of when they invaded Iraq in 2003, and staying up and like getting ready to go to bed and asking if I could stay up and watch it, thinking it was like a 2-hour ordeal or something. And then we're in the Middle East for the next 20 plus years.
Yep.
So that's really my best memory of what I can recall. And then it's just crazy how, growing up in a post 9/11 world, because that's how much it changed things.
Yeah. And that's really what you grew up in. That you didn't. Yeah, what things were before that. So yeah, it's different when you talk to somebody that your age, and I guess I don't know, and maybe it's the same for like you or I, that with our grandparents, our parents, when our grandparents would have been around for the Pearl Harbor attack on Pearl Harbor, and how that changed things, and for us to grow up in a post Pearl Harbor world. But ask them about it. This is like our kids, now that growing up in that post 9/11, and how that changed everything they grew up in a different climate, I guess, than what we grew up in.
And you know, one thing that's kind of striking me right now is that I think I had a home computer by then. I'm really dating myself now. I probably had a flip phone. I don't know that I had a smartphone by then, but I just remember that we were glued to the TV news at night. That was your news source. Can you imagine if something like that happened today and how much misinformation would be out there?
We probably
right
wouldn't
away?
even know about it.
Yeah.
That's what I get afraid of
Well,
anymore. Is like I might not
What's
know
real?
what's actually going on right
Yeah.
Yeah, what's
at
real?
any
what's
given
not?
moment. I don't know.
Well, like you said, we were glued to the TV, right? And it was like CNN. I mean, that was like pretty much it. Like we had CNN on, I think at our house, and Mom had it on like 20, like just on a constant 24/7 cycle. And but now, but you compare that to, because there wasn't social media, there wasn't smartphones, there wasn't any of that. So but then now all of a sudden you fast forward a little bit to when the Boston bombing happened, and how quickly that's like, I remember like I saw stuff and tweets and stuff coming across on my phone before it was even on the news, and how much quicker and how different that would have been if that happened now with just, I don't know. That's kind of different. The Nade brothers, if you have on YouTube, if you've ever seen their documentary and stuff, when you talk about things to watch, the National Geographic one, that one's fantastic. And
That's
that
their
20-year
footage,
stuff.
though.
But yeah, it's their footage, their documentary.
Because weren't they doing like a life in a Proby of
Yep.
New York City?
Yep.
Proby
Yeah.
firefighters.
Yep, and they were on a gas odor on a manhole cover when the first tower hit, or when the first plane hit the tower. They have some like the only footage of that first plane hitting the tower.
Yeah,
And they were on scene. They were with
Guys
the
look
first.
up, but it's already like passed. But you see it hit the.
They were on
North
scene
Tower.
with the first bat chief that was gave the on-scene report, and so some really, really just incredible footage that they have in that documentary.
I say from the footage that I have seen that always gets me is there's two things that stick out. One was with the initial, some of the initial radio reports were saying, send us everyone, like get us the whole city. They recognized that immediately. Two was they had a general idea of like what was going on and how like the best way to handle it. They weren't just chickens with their heads cut off. These were the best of the best. These were professionals, and they truly saved thousands of lives that day. It's not like they were just frozen. There's the clip. I don't know if it's the chief of the department or the operations chief, but he's talking about how we're not going to put this fire out. There's no way we get this fire out. We just got to focus on floor 71 down. That was their plan. So they had a good game plan and they thought they had a few more hours than what they did too. Yeah.
Yeah, it was amazing. And you can even hit it in that footage. I think it was radio traffic, and this is from the 60-minute story that was on last night. From 20-year anniversary. But you can hear he was like, that plane was aiming at the tower, and so I think that was good communication right away.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So Ben, you were 4.
I was 4 years old. Yes.
Wow.
Yeah, and here I am.
Here you are. All right.
A lot of time's gone by. But yeah, it's. I just think I don't know if I would have joined even the National Guard, because part of the reason for me joining the Guard was there still seemed to be something to do in the Guard. But I hear about some of the old Guard people that talk about when being in the 90s or the 80s, where it was a pretty dormant, inactive service. Back then, it truly was one weekend a month, 2 weekends out of the year. The budget was minimal, and then. The National Guard sometimes gets a little bad rap for like being reservists and such, but the unit I'm a part of, they've been deployed 5 times for a year-long tour since 9/11, and like that's for some of those they did all 5 deployments. That's a quarter of their lives that they spent, for the National Guard, and it's just how it reshaped things, and it indirectly, directly affected me. It's just kind of it's something I think about sometimes.
That's true. You can look at it as the good that came out of it, I guess, is how much more prepared we are as a nation for emergencies and intel.
Yeah.
You think about what we probably don't hear about, and what has been stopped.
Yeah, actually, last night on the that same 60 Minutes episode, they were talking about what's going on in Russia, and Ukraine right now. Did you guys see that too?
Yeah.
That was pretty interesting, of like how much intelligence is shared, and we're not there, boots on the ground, but
We're there intelligently, like giving the Ukrainians all the intelligence they can get.
yeah, I'm sure that story was calculated as well.
Yeah,
but it was a good
I'm
story.
sure, but it was good.
For sure. Anything else you want to talk about before we get into Captain
I
Voloshen.
think, like I said, we just kind of, touched it. It can be a solemn day, but at the same time, I think it's important. We're 22 years past now, and I just think it's important every year to remember.
Absolutely.
That
You got to
that
speak them
would
back
happen
into
and stuff.
existence and
Yeah.
stuff, because pretty soon, there'll be a whole generation that isn't
Yeah.
alive or hasn't been alive
Yeah.
during that time or wasn't, and you just
Yeah.
got to keep telling the stories and.
Yeah, and
living
to
it
remember,
out
it was
through words.
it was 343 firefighters that died that day, and our brothers and stuff. And outside of, I mean, if you look at loss of life in the fire service every year, we still lose about 100 people every year, line of duty deaths. 9/11, of course, the largest.
How many citizens died that day?
That was 2,000.
2,997 or something to that effect.
Yeah.
I believe. I
Just
wish
shy
I
of
had that
3,000.
number in front of me. Wouldn't be hard to do, but
No, but
just shy of 3,000.
Yep.
And
then-
while we're talking about that, how many people like that day lost their lives in New York City due to the tax on the emergency services
right, yeah, the ripple effect
system?
of it.
And
as
I
far
have to
as-
credit my wife to thinking about that, by the way,
Yeah.
because she's like, they should add those numbers, and I'm like,
right.
holy
Yeah.
cow, man!
Yeah,
I
if you
totally
would've thought
understand
about
what
it,
you
yeah.
think. What
Yep,
you're
the
thinking
ripple
there.
effect.
Yeah.
How many calls go out just New York City?
How many nomads do we get every day?
Yeah, so that,
Imagine something happening.
Well, it's the
large
first.
scale
It was
here,
the first
and
time in
what do we
30
do?
years that they had issued an all-call for FDNY.
Oh, I don't
you
know
imagine
that.
15,000 firefighters coming to work that day.
being on scene, waiting for.
So after
resources.
that chief saw that plane hit, he immediately called a third alarm in the car. I remember hearing that this morning. I'm
Yeah.
like, okay, whatever their third alarm is, but
Third
knowing
alarm
you're
is a
gonna,
lot.
that's at least 2 above your normal response, which
Yeah.
is like you said,
Yeah.
you're hundreds of guys already that you're calling in.
Yeah,
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 so-
and especially on a high rise like the Twin Towers is going to have its own response because of the size of the building. Like their first alarm there is, our whole department and then some. I mean, that's if they get a 1075, they get a worker, and then their second alarm, third alarm, it's unbelievable. FDNY, largest fire department in the world. I mean, and they have resources
next to Tokyo.
they have resources just unbelievable, the amount of people and boots that they could put on the ground like right now. So it's kind of that ripple effect that you don't really think about that, but
We was it 7-8 years ago, the last time Sioux City hosted. Actually, it was 2 times. Not this past summer, but 2 times ago, we hosted Rag by Riders at Station 3, and that group is called Team Escape, like Escape from New York, old Snake Plissken movie, which I don't know if you guys even know who that is. Okay, that's their team name, and one of the guys that was here riding a bike, his name was Lenny Bruno, good old New York City firefighter name, and if I'm not mistaken, I have a patch. I have to go. It's the 10 house.
Okay.
Is the station that's like right across the street from the World Trade Center.
Yep.
And he was a pretty neat guy to talk to, but he didn't want to.
No.
We respected his territory, but he told us a little bit, just what it is to be stationed there now with the amount of people that come by and want to talk about it. And he was like, none of us. You want to say their name, but we don't want to rehash it every day.
right,
Yeah. That's one opinion.
yeah,
Yeah,
I get it.
absolutely.
yeah, there's times where we're going you go like a fire alarm, like maybe an apartment building downtown. You do like 3-4 flights. Guy burnt food on the 4th floor or something. You get up there and you're just like, you're not like tired or anything, but you're like, man, those guys went up 68 more floors.
Yeah.
Before they even started doing
before they
work.
even started to do anything.
Yeah.
And
Because none of the
That is-
elevators were
yeah.
able to work. So
Yeah, that's. Can you imagine just how long to go up that many floors? I mean, how long it takes?
Yeah.
I don't know. I'll tell you after today.
Are you going to do it?
Yeah, I do it usually every year.
right.
We were doing it at Olson Stadium for a while there,
Yeah.
outside. George and I were, but we're gonna do it at the Ho Chunk, I think, today.
Okay.
Awesome.
Do
Good for you
100,
guys.
110?
110.
Yeah.
Stop on the 7th floor. Say hi to my wife. She's
Yeah.
in their new office.
Okay, 7th now.
7th floor.
Okay,
Yeah.
we always used to run into her in the stairwell.
Yeah.
So, hey girls.
Yeah,
Hey guys.
good for you guys. I did my
Shout out to our Vital Wealth on the 7th floor of the Hood Chunk Center.
Ed Voloshen, also universally loved. That's a whole shift gears here, Cap. We we went to Iowa City a couple weeks ago. Went to the Hawkeye game, and we had some good conversations on the way down, the way back. And I always love hearing your story. It's a fun one. So let's start with growing up in Sioux City, because you are a Sioux City local, and Sioux City does have a special place in your heart.
That's right. Yeah. Born and raised, all the hard knocks. Let's see. Born in '68. I went to East High School. Grew up in Morningside. That's where I'm stationed now. I'd love to be back in that neighborhood. Went to Whittier Elementary School, which is now apartments. Went to Hayworth Middle School, or junior high, they called it back then, which is now East Middle. And then I went to the old East Middle for a year or two, and then East High School. So, yeah, all those places are gone. Listening to my dad, I do remember when there was no mall. It was all gravel roads out there. So,
Wow.
yeah, the mall was new. I think maybe when I was like in 7th grade, 6th or 7th grade, the mall was new. So, yeah, I've seen quite a bit. When I was a kid, downtown was where you went shopping. My mom didn't drive actually until I think I was like in middle school. So as a little kid, you got on the bus at Morningside, you rode the bus downtown, did all your before school shopping and all that kind of stuff. And there were quite a few restaurants down there. Bishop's Cafeteria, I think. I think it was called like the Red Rooster, was in the Yonker store downtown. That was kind of a fancy place to go have lunch. It was a big deal to go downtown and go school shop and all that kind of stuff.
That's pretty cool. And you were a little decent football player too in high school. You had
Yeah,
some good East High football teams.
I have a saying: the older I get, the better I was. Graduated in 1987 from East, and was fortunate enough to play football for 4 years there. And Coach Fiegel, shout out to my high school football coach, Walt Fiegel Foundation, still going on to this day. He was such a beloved and respected coach. So,
What position did you play?
I was offensive guard. I was the pulling guard.
I was going to say, were you pulling guard?
I was a pulling guard, yep. Story about Coach Fiegel, I think I was a junior. We were playing Des Moines Valley, and of course they were good then too. And I pulled out, and I don't know. I'm going to say that he was an all-stater, defensive end, left defensive end. And it was like the first play that I had ever really got into a varsity game. And back then, as a junior, there were no sophomores that were called up, so it was just juniors and seniors. And juniors, you may or may not play. And I got on that game, and I hit that defensive end, and I think I landed flat on my back. Came running off the field, and excuse my language, Coach Fiegel goes, "God damn, Voloshen, you got your oil changed on that one." It was right in front of him.
Oh, that's really funny.
Yeah, so good Coach Fiegel story. So yeah, I played football at East, and I don't know, just a lot of good memories about Sioux City and East High School and Morningside and all through. Let's see, after high school, my plan was to go to Iowa University. I had several buddies and I that were all signed up to go, and at the last minute, I guess, got recruited by Morningside to play, and so I went to Morningside for a year. That didn't pan out for a lot of different reasons, playing football. And so I stayed there for my first year and finished. And my second semester went to Iowa University, and then came back home. I'm a homeboy for sure by heart, but came back home and finished at Morningside. Was a double major of business administration, marketing, and secondary business education, and a phys ed minor. So came back to school. I thought, the business world was where I was going to be. I had Doyle was his last name. I'll remember his first name. We just all called him Coach Doyle. He was like a track coach. He talked to me. He was like, "Hey, Ed, you played football. I think you would do well teaching. Have you ever thought about going into education?" And I was like, "No." And to get that major, it was, I think, probably another semester worth of classes in total. So I took some education classes, thought I was going to be a high school business teacher and football coach. And so I helped coach at East for a couple of years, 1 year with the sophomores, 1 year with the varsity, just a volunteer assistant, learning the ropes. And when I was in college, I worked for a Great West Casualty Company. They insured truck drivers. And back then, it was almost kind of like a fire department job. You answered the phone. Their claim to fame is that if you're a truck driver and you have an accident, we'll have someone to you. We'll have someone on the phone immediately and have someone to you within 24 hours to help you with your accident, kind of thing. So to do that, they employed several of us young college kids. We would go into work at 4 o'clock, and there was a little bed and a microwave and a TV and stuff, and you just stayed there all night long till 8 o'clock in the morning and answered the phones. If the accident was not too bad, you called an independent adjuster somewhere, wherever the accident was, got the truck driver some help. If it merited it, you would call the on-duty liability adjuster from the South Sioux office. Back then, we had an office in Boise, Idaho, and an office in Sioux City, Nebraska. So you would call somebody. We didn't insure a lot of truck drivers out on the East Coast. You got off at 8 o'clock in the morning. So I finished working for them. I worked for Sportsman Sporting Goods. You get,
downtown.
They had a store downtown. They had a store at the mall. And so when I graduated from Morningside, I student taught a lot in Bronson. Shout out to Jesse Pedersen.
The mayor.
Really?
The mayor of Lawton, yeah.
Jesse Wesley.
Yeah.
Like Brad Wesley off Roadhouse.
That's right. I always said that he should have a club out there called Jesse's Girls. But so I stayed working for Great West Casualty. I'm kind of giving you the whole gamut.
That's good.
Yeah,
It's a great story.
We're here for
Okay.
it.
Everybody's heard this story probably 3 times from me, so forgive me. But so I stayed working for Great West Casualty. Graduated from Morningside, and I was working for them already. They had a claims processor job open. It was in the business world, and Great West still is a good company to work for. It was great then. Became a claims processor and did that for about a year and a half. And Great West opened up an office in Bloomington, Indiana. 1995. So I should have graduated in 91, but I did a victory lap and graduated in 92.
Lots of people go to college for 7 years.
That's right. So 92.
Some of them are called doctors.
Yeah, no kidding. So I worked in South Sioux, as a claims processor for maybe a little bit longer than that. And they needed some folks to go out and fill the office in Bloomington, Indiana. They wanted to take like half the team, 25 people or so from Sioux City. And they didn't have enough underwriters to go, so I became a commercial insurance underwriter, writing truck insurance. Sounds really fancy, but basically you're saying if a trucking company is insurable or not, and if they are, how much it's going to cost them. Mm-hmm. That's and you have all the charts and everything in front of you to determine that. Safety people. So I moved to Bloomington in 1995. No, I'm sorry, 1993. And I was there for 2 years. And, the office wasn't quite where I wanted to be. It was a pretty hectic time out there. It was new territory. We started writing insurance business in Indiana and Tennessee and Kentucky and a lot of areas that Great West hadn't been in before. So there was it was busy. There was a lot of business. Really good times, really good formative years. Had a lot of great people mentored me out there working. Dick Lear, Ron Honka, and Lori Elder are a few that I remember right off the bat. But in 1995, I decided that I wanted to make a career change. I didn't have a career at all. I cashed in my 401k. I sold my newer Chevy truck. I sold everything that I had, bought a $900 station wagon, and hit the road.
Best part.
I did the van life before it was van life.
That's right.
I guess, yeah.
Wagon life.
I actually, there was a girl, Sarah Bailey, who played volleyball at Morningside. She was from Powell, Wyoming. And she and her sister were doing the same. They were doing the van life in a literal VW bus, like an old one. And they had called, and they were heading out east. And they were like, "Hey, Ed, can we stay? You live in Bloomington now, right?" And I'm like, "Yeah." And they were like, "Can we stay with you for a week?" And I'm like, "Yeah, that's fine." It might have been a few days. I don't remember. But I was already kind of tossing around the idea, what do I want to do? I don't think I really want to work in the office the rest of my life. And so they were living in Bozeman, Montana at the time, and they were taking the summer off and doing a van trip. And they were like, "Well, we're going to be back in Bozeman in July, I think." This was, I don't know, March or April when they are in Indiana. They're like, if you ever want to come out to Montana, you can sleep on the couch. You got a place to stay. So I'm like, okay. So they left. I called them a couple weeks later. I'm like, were you serious? And they were like, yeah. And I said, okay. So that's sold everything that I had, and Mom and Dad thought that I had
Totally lost it.
Totally lost it. I did, but thinking back now, and I hope my kids don't listen to this because I would totally lose it if they did this. Right. But I don't know. It seemed like an okay decision at the time. Thankful for God's grace, I guess, through all of it, But so I hit the road and started traveling. And I had a plan, that I was going to go to Montana and find work, eventually end up there. So I left Indiana and went out to the East Coast, traveled around a bunch of different spots, Pennsylvania, and went to D.C. I had a friend in D.C. that I stayed with. She was a staffer for a senator from, where's Iowa City? Is that Lynn County? Or Johnson County? Johnson County. So she was a staffer for a U.S. senator out from Johnson County, or I guess it would be for that part of Iowa. And she lived in a row house right on the other side of the Supreme Court building, which is just east of the Capitol building. Wow. So she was right in the mix of it. So I called her and said, hey, I'm going to be in D.C. Can I, you got any hints on a place to stay? And she was like, yeah, actually, I'm not going to be here for a week. You can stay in my room. So I think there were 6 to 10 young government working kids that lived in this row house, and they each had a room. They shared a couple bathrooms, whatever. So that was one of my stops. Virginia Beach, went down through the South, went back to Indiana, picked up a few things, came home for a week or two, just to tell Mom and Dad that I hadn't lost my mind, that, I'm okay.
I'm okay.
Yeah. Left here, went down through Oklahoma and Texas and visited friends and Phoenix, and then back up through the mountains. I had friends in Boulder, and I wound up in Bozeman. I think that whole loop that I did took about, 3 months or so. I was sleeping in the back of the station wagon or with people, or didn't have a tent. I would just, if I got tired of driving, I'd pull over. And the funny thing is that was long before cell phones or Google Maps or anything too. So I had maps of each state. So the night before I would I'm going to take this road, and I'd make a list and put it on the dashboard in front of me, and if I felt like stopping, I'd stop. If not, I'd keep going.
It's like Forrest Gump.
Yeah, it was. Yeah. Got to Bozeman, and this story is all going to end up somewhere, so stick with me.
Yeah, no, we are. I'm locked in.
I'm
always
I'm
locked in.
Yep.
Yes.
Was in Bozeman for the summer, and I worked for a temp agency, so it was wherever they sent me. Whether I unloaded a truckload of bird feed one time, and worked in a cheese curd factory for a couple of days. But we would go hiking up in the mountain. Bozeman's surrounded by 3 mountain ranges, so we would go hiking on the weekends, and then I'd come back and work a few days during the week, looking for work. But back then, the labor jobs out in Bozeman paid $6 to $8 an hour, believe it or not. And the professional jobs are pretty hard to come by. And I haven't been back to Bozeman since then. I heard that it's incredibly expensive now, and a lot of California implants and all that. My friend that lived in Bozeman, she's in Sacramento, California at the time, or now. It's been a few since I spoke with her too. But my dad called. So I was out in Bozeman for a couple of months doing that. And my dad called and said, hey, Norm Swanson Heating, Air Conditioning, Home Builders, Realty at the time, is building a few homes this summer, and they need some carpentry help. And I grew up working construction jobs for them. So I'm like, yeah, I think he was saying, hey.
Time to reel it in, huh?
Time to reel it in. Let's get to work, Yeah. And I was pretty broke at the time,
Yeah.
So I'm like, okay. I had a job. I had just got a job working for a log home company out of Bozeman, and they would build a log home in Bozeman and disassemble it, and then go drive to a mountain somewhere to put it back together. And it was getting to be late summer, early fall, and I had gotten hired, but the deal was, I didn't know when I got hired, was that you had to drive your own vehicle to the building site. And I had my old Oldsmobile station wagon, front-wheel drive station wagon, had 193,000 miles on it. And I'm like, man, this thing is not going to make it through the mountains. So I'm like, yeah, it's probably a good plan. Go back to Sioux City, work construction, and figure out what I'm going to do. And there was also a girl involved in all of that. I had started dating again back in Sioux City. So I came back home, and she was actually in Lincoln, Nebraska at the time, but we were talking, and came back home, was working construction. We got the houses finished, and the carpenter that I worked with through Swanson, he was helping remodel a home for Jim Clark that winter. Jim was rehabbing a home, and so Jim hired Gary, and Gary hired me. And I don't know, it was probably like a December day, and Jim and I were sanding a patio door, I can still remember. And I was telling him a little bit about myself, and said, I have a degree. I like helping people, but I like working with my hands. I really don't want to be in an office. And I had already checked out like the Red Cross and United Way and places like that. And I said, but you have to volunteer for those places before you get a job. And I said, I just can't afford that right now, and I don't have any experience with them. And he kind of like turned his head and he looked at me and he was like, man, I think you're describing the fire department of what you want to do. He's like, we're testing here soon. And so a huge shout out to Chief Clark. He was definitely my in with the fire department back then. And so I went and tested, and I think back then, I want to say there was right around just under or just over 400 people that tested for the fire department then.
That's crazy.
It was at the convention center, and it was just tables on end testing. Yeah, if I remember, I think it was at the convention center. And so I made the list, thankfully, but back then they formed a top 10 list and a secondary top 10 list, and the top 10 list was only good for a year, and the secondary, if they didn't use up that whole first list in a year, they would retest. So they tested every year.
Wow.
Yeah. And I was number 12. No, I was number 11. So I missed the top 10 list by one, if I remember correctly. And in the meantime, I didn't think that I was going to get hired on the fire department. And my boss back in Indiana called and said, hey, we still need underwriters. The business is still coming in. We still need some help. And I told Ron then, I'm like, I'll think about it, but I applied for the fire department. I don't know if it's going to happen. He said, well, would you think about coming back temporarily? And I said, okay. So I did, moved back out to Indiana in 96, the summer of July of, I think it was June of 96. And because from everything that I heard, I had somebody I knew in human resource. It was like a kid I graduated, his mom worked at human resources. So it wasn't,
Wow.
It was somebody that I could call to say, kind of what's going on. And she was like, I really can't tell you too much, but, they have hired, but it doesn't look like they're going to hire anymore, kind of thing. And so I went back to Indiana and was working there temporarily. And I actually just had gone in to tell Ron. I'd met Carol, my wife now, back in Indiana. She came to work from Great West. A little shout out to Sandra Vidido, who worked at Great West back then. That had a saying that I don't think I can say on here about dating somebody in the office. But something about the company Inc. I don't know what it was.
Okay. Yeah, I got you.
So I went in and told Ron. I said, I like Great West and I like what I do, and I'm here to stay. The fire department's not going to happen. And Carol and I had dated for a little, I don't know, I want to say less than a month. And I had already planned a trip home to visit mom and dad, to let them know I had been gone for a year again at that point. And so I'm like, hey, Carol, you want to go to Sioux City and meet my mom and dad and stuff? She was like, yeah. So we drove through the night on a Thursday night, got home. She met my mom and dad, and she was like, hey, I'm going to go lay down. I'm kind of tired. I said, okay. And it was 9:30 in the morning that morning, and Patty Bowerly from the fire department calls. I had left my Sioux City, my mom and dad's address and phone number, thinking that the fire department would hire somebody from Iowa, from Sioux City versus Indiana.
Okay.
So Patty calls and says, "Is Ed Voloshen there?" "Yeah, this is me." And well, I'm just offering you a job from Sioux City Fire, or for Sioux City Fire. And I'm like, okay, I'm in, you know. And woke Carol up from her nap after she met my parents and said, and she knew, you know, I had told her all of this, and she knew. And if you know Carol, you guys, I'm sure everybody does, but I said, "What do you think?" And she was like, "I guess we better go look for a place to live." So I said, "All right."
So you kidnapped Carol to keep her, is what I always do. Basically, you drove her across the country to bring her back. You're, like, "You're not getting away from me."
Her friends thought, "Yeah, he lost his mind, and so is she now." She's drinking the Kool-Aid too.
Oh, no.
Nice.
Yeah, so that was 1997. So I came to work April 28th, 1997 for Sioux City Fire Rescue, and it's been a blessing ever since.
Yeah.
It really has.
I love that. I love that story. Just all
That's
the,
Yeah.
all the crazy ways to get exactly where you're at.
Yeah, but good for you for like I just love the part like I sold everything, jumped in a station wagon and drove across the country and just did it. Like I love that part. That's good for you.
Yeah,
that's something you can never get that back. You can't make that up.
Emotions may play a part in my decision-making process.
I love it. What was your first couple days in the fire department like?
Oh, man. You know, I think everybody's so nervous when you first come on. And I was 28 years old, right? 29 years old when I got hired. And, of course, you know, had a career and before that and everything. So, but I thankfully, hopefully I knew enough that trying to keep my mouth shut. I mean, that's pretty hard for me most of the time.
You know, a lot more life experience than most people getting hired.
Yeah, it was a little bit of a pay cut, you know, but I remember after I had applied and I was working construction, I would drive down 6th Street going westbound, and I could see and I knew that Station 3 was where the new guys went. I didn't know a lot of people in the fire department. I really did. I didn't grow up wanting to be on the fire department. Once that seed got planted, I was like, man, that is what I want to do. How cool would that be? You know, and to be able to work with your hands and help people and be part of a team and all that kind of stuff. I would drive by on 6th Street and I'd see them out playing basketball at night. I'm like, oh man, I want to be there. And then it was kind of like realizing that it wasn't going to happen, you know, and then getting the call. It was pretty good. So my first few days, I don't remember much. I think it's probably because I was pretty nervous. I do remember Captain Capron at the time. I did know Rhonda, Denny's ex-wife. I played softball for a team that she had back in the day. And so she knew that I got hired, and I didn't know this. She had told Denny then that, you know, take it easy on this kid or whatever. Yeah. And so I'm sitting at the kitchen table. I think it might have been during my first 2 weeks. We kind of still did the same format then. And I'm just sitting there at the kitchen table, not saying anything. And he's got the newspaper up. He's not even looking at any of us. And he says, "So which one of you knows my ex-old lady?" And I'm like, "I do, sir." And he puts down the paper and he says, "She told me to tell you hi." She put the newspaper. He put the newspaper back up. I'm like, made it through that one. Yeah. He was also the one that I think, I don't know, might have been during the first 2 weeks. And I didn't drink coffee. I wasn't a coffee drinker. And he was like, "Did you put your money in for coffee, kid?" And I said, "I don't drink coffee, sir." "Well, I didn't ask you if you drank coffee. I asked if you put your money in for coffee." Yeah. So I think you know, I grew up working construction, so I have that background. I can't say I was very mechanical with engines or anything like that, like nuts and bolts. And so it was a big learning curve for me coming on the fire department. It really was. And I tell my kids that now, you know, they're like, you know, "Dad, how do you know this stuff?" And I'm like, you just pay attention and you put your hands on it. Yeah. So. That's
kind of surprising for a guy that I know does the tile work and all kinds of stuff that you weren't considered yourself mechanical, because that surprises me. I guess,
construction wise, I don't know. I just not afraid to lift things, I guess. You know? So put your hands on it. Yeah.
Who'd you come on with?
There were 4 of us that got hired. So kind of what happened was I didn't think they were going to certify the second list, and that's why I went in. Chris Hayden was number 12 on the second list, and they had hired, I think it was Tom Leonard and Tom Standish were on the first list. I think that was right. Yeah, because remember there was 2 Toms and a hen.
Oh, okay.
That was the old joke back then. Yeah, just to be politically incorrect.
Yeah.
Firefighters are pretty much that, aren't we?
Yeah.
Girls and boys, yeah. So Chris got hired. She was number 12, but what it did for me was it certified the second list. So then it was just kind of a waiting game, and I don't remember. I don't think I knew that. I don't think that I knew that they had certified the second list at the time, and so there were 4 of us that got hired. Here's a little bit of a story, and I don't know the complete history of this, but Sioux City went to a 2-platoon to a 3-platoon system approximately 25 years before I got hired. And so there was a whole gamut of guys that came on as that 3rd platoon, and so they were all retiring about the time that I got hired. So it created
a lot of turnover.
Yeah. So I came on with 4 people. It was myself, Jim O'Keefe, Randy Kleinberg, and Jeff Benson.
Wow.
And Randy and Jeff went to the 3rd shift, and Jim and I went to 1st shift. So, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So what was that? Your first year at Station 3 with old Station 3.
Old 3s, yeah.
Well, what was probation like in 1997 compared to now? Because you spent a lot of time down at Station 3 and kind of know how we do things.
Yeah. So here's a picture of, I think that was maybe the day after I got
Yeah.
It was a lot the same, except everything was on paper, you know. I think we had a computer back then, but it was the old green screen, and all you really put in was the name and the address, and maybe what like a call was. That was all that was. District was all on overhead. It was all paper maps. Essentials was overheads in the kitchen. Most of our classes were taught right there in the kitchen at Old 3s. There was a big white grease board on one wall and the kitchen sink on the other side of the room, and so that's where all your classes were. We had the old training tower, which is now part of CMG. I don't know if you guys see the big sand piles and stuff out there, but
Yep.
Just a lot of good stuff. I do remember, backing up a little bit, I remember after, let's see, it must have been after testing, and we did the combat challenge form of physical agility test. That was at the old training center. I remember going in there for that.
Were they still using that building when you came on?
Oh yeah, for sure.
Okay.
Yeah, quite a long time. Even after I came on, we still use that.
Because I know when I took it in 01, it was a combat challenge there, but they had abandoned using the building as a regular building. We still used the classroom a little bit, and it was storage, but it wasn't like a training center building. They had already started to shift at that point and stuff, and that was in 01. Like when the building started to move and the walls and everything like that. Yeah.
Yeah. The building was fine. The concrete structure was fine. It was the old dump, that it was built on. So it got to we didn't use the classrooms out there already when I came on in 97 because a lot of the doors wouldn't open because the building had shifted so bad and stuff.
Okay.
So it was more just storage out there. But we would still use it, the concrete tower. But then the roads got so bad that the rig started bottoming out on the blacktop that was sinking. And that's when we're like, well, we can't use it anymore. Chief Hamilton was the one that hired me. And let's see. Grant Mears was an assistant chief. I'm pretty sure that Orville Teeley was an assistant chief then. Jim McCrory was a fire marshal. I'm trying to remember it all. And Pat Flynn was an assistant chief as well.
Wow.
I think.
How long did it take for you guys to get your first fire?
I was just going to ask that.
I don't remember the date. I just shared this story when we did our RIT Mayday training, because they teach you, right, don't lose track of the person. My first fire was a mobile home fire up on 28th Street, and it was in the back bedroom, and it was hot. I just remember going in and thinking, wow, this is hot in here. And Jack Burgers was my officer. I had Charlie Capron Lieutenant Capron was on the engine, and Lieutenant Burgers was on the truck. And I happened to be on the truck that day, so we're making our way to the back bedroom with a hose line, and I pulled his boot off because I was like, I am not going to lose hold. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
We didn't have, we have so much nice equipment now afforded to us by the city and this new training center that you really get in smoky conditions, not in an emergency early, which is really good. And I can't say that we had that then. There was a big old huge pool table upstairs at Old Threes, and they would block the room out, and you'd have to it was like an obstacle course underneath the pool table. So you guys still do that down at Threes with the new guys, right? A little bit. Yeah.
A little bit.
So we had that, but we didn't have a good environment to do live fire burns back then.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know if I pulled it all the way off. It seemed to me like I did. He probably yelled at me, And then another funny thing about that. So we made it back there. I do remember Brian Van Hollen being there that day. I don't know. Maybe he was on engine 7 at the time because maybe he was a floater. I don't know. But we were in the back bedroom, and I was like, I said something to him, I think, and I was like, wow, it is really smoky in here. And he was like, wipe your mask off. I had steam all over my face piece. And I wiped the steam off. I'm like, oh, there everybody is.
You can see it.
Yeah. So everybody goes through those stories. Probably me more than some. But
Did you still in '97? So full? Were you guys? Do we have full turnout gear then? Pants and coat. Full gear?
Yeah. And we had.
It was the old MSAs with the regulator on the belt, mounted regulator with low pressure hose. Yeah.
Yep. And if I remember right, we had the Fords back then, the OpenCAD Fords, and a couple of the engines had the SCBAs built into the seat, and a couple didn't. So, you had to get off the rig and put your mask on and everything. So there was still some of the older officers that would go into a fire without putting their mask on just because of easy.
That was the next thing I was going to ask is how much, compared to now, we wear SCBA so much more, but we know more about cancers and things like that. But then how much, because I know even when I came on in 2002, for a car fire, it depended on the officer, but a lot of car fires you didn't put a mask on right away for a car fire either.
No,
you just
I would say dumpster fire, car fires, no. But Lieutenant Capron, Lieutenant Burgers at the time, they were younger lieutenants, I would say, so they
pretty savvy with using the masks.
Yeah, we used the mask. Yep. Mm-hmm. The tools were about the same, except for some of the power tools that we use.
They probably still are the same.
Some of them are,
And then up until a couple of years ago, they were the same, probably with power tools.
I guarantee all the pots and pans are the same.
Those transferred from old Threes to new Threes, as you know, because you were
the trash cans in the stations are the exact same.
You got to keep something
got
the
it,
same.
right?
Yeah.
That's like 100 years of cooking seasoning built into those. You can't let go of that.
Seriously.
Hazmat was the hot topic back then. So 97 is when I came on, and I don't remember when the terror explosion happened, but I think it was probably in the late 80s, early 90s when hazmat really started. USAR came years after that, but so there was a lot of training for that. But I don't know, we didn't have technical rescue stuff. We did have a high angle rope rescue team, but that was mostly just truck one guys.
Sure.
Not that many. So.
Gotcha. Yeah. So you get through your first year, which is always a special year to everyone, and then I kind of like to think from there till maybe you were assigned, or even your third man before you were an officer. Any fires, calls that stick out as some really good ones in your memory?
Stockyards.
Okay.
I think I was a young floater. And I wish I remembered all these years so I could put it in context. But I just remember I lived on, Carol and I lived on South Paxton, but by Roberts Stadium. We still live on South Paxton, just different 100 block now. We lived across the street from the stadium. And I remember getting a call at home, and I was like, oh, this, like an all call, and this is what it's like, kind of like exciting. And so I went down through stockyards, and I just remember I got on Lewis Boulevard, and you could see the flames, and I was like,
Oh man.
holy crap.
that's good.
This is the real deal. Yeah. So that was a memorable one. As a kid, I do remember, I was in college when 232 hit.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't have anything to do with the fire department or emergency services then, but I do remember that. I was working construction for the summertime, going, in college, and we were on the interstate. I don't remember if I was getting off work. I don't remember what time of day it was. I just remember seeing a lot of ambulances on I-29 at the time, thinking, what happened? Yeah. Thankfully, that whole shift of people that got hired, like I was saying, the reason that were retiring, also meant that I only floated for a little over 2 years, I think, before I got assigned a spot.
That's quick.
Cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, because you were in Iowa City the other week. Or no, we were golfing the Rudy Lee golf tournament. You were telling me about how you went out to eights right away. You were signed with Rudy and Gary Bennett.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember. I think I don't know that. I think I went right to third man on engine 3.
Okay.
Because also about that time, back then you didn't even have to have an EMTB to get hired. So I think I did my basic. You did your basic after you got off probation.
Mm-hmm.
Sure.
Really, look at how much our job is EMS
Wow,
now.
no kidding.
Yeah. There were maybe 2 paramedics on the whole department at the time. It was Siouxland Paramedics. It had already switched from Siouxland Health Services at the time. I'm trying to remember the timeline of it all. So I went and got my basic. Yeah, and then I started floating. And then because there were still first responders on the department. Not even a basic. So
But like CPR.
It was kind of like
training
your
or
CPR
something?
card, yeah.
Sure.
And I was a basic, but I think that I had already went on and got my EMT intermediate, is what they called it, not advanced EMT.
Mm-hmm.
And there was, I kind of got in the mix of it. I didn't really want to be in the mix of it, but those people that were still, the firefighters that were still first responders, they were told that they had to become basics, and if they didn't want to, and some of them didn't want to go do it on their day off, and so they all got booted out of their spots and were put down at Station 1 so that their days were full of becoming EMT basics at Station 1.
Gotcha.
So there, you can imagine there were some hard feelings.
Oh, I'm sure.
And so my first assignment was third on engine 3 with, I believe it was, Headland was driving, and Lieutenant Dunnington at the time was lieutenant on the engine. Yeah. I think that was our crew, if I remember right. And that only lasted for like 9 months because those guys had got, booted out of their spots. And so we were the young guys that took their spots.
The faces to hate.
Yeah. Yeah. Because we had gone, but I don't know. It was just, something that, career advancement, so it's something you do. Not faulting anybody for that.
Was it busier fire-wise early on in your career compared to now?
Well, I think it felt like it because I tell people like it right now, we went over 11,000 runs last year.
Mm-hmm.
So I remember going over 5,000 runs a couple of years after I got on, and that was a huge deal.
Yeah.
And so we just had less EMS runs. And so it felt like you had more fires, but I think we probably had about the same amount of fires, just proportionally.
Just added that
That's
much
a good
more
way to
EMS
look at
calls.
it.
Yeah.
I guess.
Yeah. I do remember being on probation because we had the open cabs, the Fords, and the tornado sirens were going off, and the rain was coming down in sheets, and let's see, we had radios, we had Tony, and it wasn't like the old Bell or anything like that, but lightning had hit a house up on Jackson Street, and there was smoke in the house, and we pulled out of Station 3, and I'm thinking, the hell, the tornado sirens are going off. I'm like, well, I guess this is what I signed up for.
Yeah.
It wasn't, if I remember right, it wasn't much of a fire. I don't even know if we did anything, but it was just kind of a realization that you're in the game now. So,
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love
Somebody's got to show up.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Yeah. So I went from 3s, and then after some of those guys, passed they went back to their spot. Some of them stayed at ones because they were being pretty obstinate. They were like, nope, screw it. You transfer me down here. You got to put up with me now.
I don't know anyone. Perfect. I don't know anyone like that.
Weird.
Stubborn fire.
Well, that's good to hear that's never not been a thing.
Yeah.
That's really funny.
Yeah. So then I went and I was fourth on truck one with Brian Porterfield, and I think Holloway was there first, and then Jack Holloway made assistant chief, and Porterfield came, I think. Bob Marr, Larry Whitwer was down there. A lot of names that people probably don't remember now, but it was good time. So
Oh, for sure.
I was fourth for a couple of years then, and then I went to Engine 5 for like a year, and I was with Lieutenant Stowers and Kevin Clemmy, and that was new 5. So new 5
it was new 5s. I was
yeah.
going to say, was that old 5s or was it new 5s?
New 5s.
New 5s.
So that was 2002. So
Yep.
I had been on 5 years at that time,
Okay. Wow.
and I really loved that assignment. It was a new station. Lieutenant Stowers was just a gem of a guy. He really was. He did his job well. He was respectful. He didn't get excited. It was somebody that I really looked up to, and he was helpful. He would get up in the mornings and run. So I remember that, getting up with him before we got off shift, and we would run down to like Southern Hills Baptist Church. So like around the parking lot, down to that church, around their parking lot and back, and
Cool.
do a couple miles in the morning. And
Nice.
just when an older member of the fire department is willing to work out with a younger kid or whatever and give you some advice, and that was a good year.
Awesome.
And then I don't know, who knows why, but I was only there for a year. I probably opened up my mouth too much. I don't know. Maybe I shouldn't have went on those morning runs.
Feeling you out the whole time on
Yeah,
the run.
exactly.
I got to get this guy out of here.
Yeah. But as a young firefighter too, in hindsight, I thought way too much into why I was getting transferred and all. And really, I'm sure it was just filling spots.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But I went to 8s for 2 years, and Jerry Bennett was my lieutenant, and I want to say he just got promoted to be a lieutenant, or he was a newer lieutenant when he got sent out there.
Yeah, because I think he was, when I came out in 02, he was, I want to say he was driving, was he driving a truck?
Truck 3?
Truck
Probably.
3.
Yeah, he used
I
to
think
drive
he was
truck
driving
3
truck
for
3.
what I
That
Yeah.
could be.
hear
Yeah.
and talking to him. It
Yeah.
was basically
Yeah,
truck
I think
3.
he was driving truck 3 when I came on.
And that was a good assignment. You know what I mean? I mean, at the time, it didn't feel very good because I liked 5s, and I'm like, well, what the heck's going on?
Sure.
But that was a really good time. Rudy Lee was driving, and Jerry was our new lieutenant, and so there was a lot of personalities going on there. But it was a good learning time. I really look fondly back on that time.
You're getting a good scope of the town, though, working, too.
Yeah,
the different
for
areas
sure.
of town.
For sure.
Even growing up, I'm sure, around here, you might not have had so much contact with the west side, or did you? I don't know.
No, I would have got my ass kicked. You kidding me?
Yeah, right. What are you doing on this side?
No, I'm just teasing. I had good friends. John Church, I remember, was a kid that went to West High that I grew up with. That was he and I used to hang out and stuff. But yeah, it was definitely good. Riverside, and I have relatives that are from North Sioux, so I kind of knew Riverside a little bit. And,
Okay.
yeah. So I was there for 2 years, and driving spot opened up. Let's see, man, really taxing my memory now.
So you went to drive down at 3s, didn't
So
you?
I went to drive engine 3 on second shift for Lieutenant Standish at the time. So he was a new lieutenant
Okay.
at the time, yeah. Because I remember Rusty was the lieutenant on the truck at that time. That was because he went to be captain at 7s. And so I was with Tom for like 2 years. I was driving engine 3, yeah. And I was promoted in 90. I made lieutenant in 97. No, I'm sorry, 2007. Yep. There was a 10-year.
You said tenure?
10 years,
Okay.
yeah. Yeah. And then I stayed there at 3s, No, I take that back. I went to Station 1 for 2 years on Engine 1 as a young lieutenant.
Okay.
Yep.
What was that like taking
It was good. So to give you the honest, true story, I rode the lieutenant's list for a while. I was young, rightly so. And I probably have the list at home. I have to remember who all was on it. I was one of the last candidates to be selected off it, which is fine. And I was at the National Fire Academy at the time, and I didn't think that it was going to happen. Chief Martin was here, and I had been doing union work leading up to that. When I was driving down at Station 3, I was union president or vice president for 2 years. Dan Kugel got me involved with that, so shout out to Dan. Troy Sonicson and Dan Kugel and Rudy was the treasurer at the time. The
nice.
four of us were the e-board. So I was vice president for 2 years, and I did the presidency for 2 years, and then I did a 3-year stint, three-year stint on the state board. But I forgot where my story was going. So I was at the National Fire Academy, and Chief Martin called me and said, "Hey, I want to congratulate you. We're promoting you to lieutenant." I'm like, "Thank you." And he's like, I'm going to be honest with you. It was not a unanimous decision. And me being a new chief, I called Chief Hamilton and got his input. And he said that you would make a good lieutenant. So congratulations. We are sending you to Station 1, and you will have to prove yourself, is basically what he told me. So
I'm sure you appreciated the honesty, though, right?
I did.
For sure.
Not like why you didn't even have to wonder why, right? They were sending you down to ones to prove yourself.
Yeah.
Like, wow. Okay.
Yep. So you better hit the ground running and try to make some good decisions.
Okay.
Yeah.
What inspired you to promote? Like, why did you at that time?
I think probably personal and career advancement would be the altruistic statement.
Sure.
And that's part of it. I think all of us are fairly competitive, right? So that's a way to compare yourself to others.
Mm-hmm.
I can't say it was ever like I have to be promoted because it's, what people think of me or anything like that. I've just always loved to be involved in things. And so that was kind of like the next progression of being involved was being an officer. Yeah. Okay. After doing the union work and that kind of stuff. So thinking back on it.
Those first couple of years in Truck 1, pretty anything that stands out in your memory from your time down there?
Yeah, maybe a little horseplay. One fun thing that we used to do, and we even did this on probation, we would challenge the threes crews to volleyball or basketball or whatever. But old threes was still open then, because new threes was 2002 as well, right? I think.
Yes.
New threes? Yeah,
Yeah,
because when it officially opened a week before I started.
Yeah.
Okay.
So we would, and we didn't have near as much equipment, so that whole fifth bay down at Station 1 was open, or we just have to move like one grass rig or whatever. Mm-hmm. So we'd set up a volleyball net down there, and we had a lot of fun. We really did.
That's cool.
We'd have all-out basketball games.
Oh, yeah.
I remember Jim and I being on probation, and nobody could stop Kenny Bleak's hook shot. I'm telling you, it was
man.
Lou Alcindor out there. You couldn't defend it.
That's really fun.
Yeah.
And so you were down there for a while, and then you went to Station 3?
I did. Yeah. So I was. No, that's when I went to 5s after being on Truck 1 for a couple of years. I went to 5s and then 8s, and then back to 3s.
Wow. So I didn't realize you bounced around that much.
Yep.
You really saw a lot of the department.
Yeah. It was good. So I went to drive back at 3s, then I went to 1s.
Mm-hmm.
For 2 years on Engine 1. I had Ron Lenz was the driver, and Don Dorn was on the back.
Okay.
I'm trying to remember who was on the truck. I'm pretty sure we were first shift. Most of my career until I made captain was on first shift for whatever reason, just I think once because of vacation picks and everything, you try to lead people on the same shift if you can. So I was at 3s for 11 years as a lieutenant, 12 years, right? I think it's 11 years, yeah. 12 years, because I think I made captain in 19.
Wow.
Okay.
Yeah.
That would sound right.
So I was a lieutenant there at Station 3 for 12 years. Yeah.
How many groups of probationaries did you have?
5, if I remember right. I think it was 5 or 6 groups I had through that time.
Some good memories doing that?
Oh, absolutely. Loved it. Absolutely loved it. Really did.
Yeah.
Really did. Worked with Lieutenant Culbertson through a lot of that. Assistant Chief Kelleher was a young lieutenant that came through there. And I think he and I were together for 4 years. I mean, they all just start blending together,
Sure.
you know. Yeah. I think it was pretty much either Denny or Culbertson or Kelleher that I was with, if I remember right. Al Kinsey was a mainstay, right, on first shift.
I was just going to ask you, talk about working with Al a little bit.
And Jesse.
And Jesse.
I know what I'm talking about. That dirtbag.
Al was so grounding. I mean, that's the only way you can put it, you know, even as a lieutenant down there. I will say this, when you work at threes, and with all respect for the drivers that are down there and stuff, the probies, you really put a lot into them. But until you become an officer down there, it's like when you become an officer, they become your kids. Mm-hmm. And everybody thinks, this is my saying for that too, everybody thinks that the new guys should be the firefighters they think they are. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so they're always, you know, did you hear what your probie did? Did you hear what he screwed up? Or did you hear what, you know, that they didn't do this when they got out there? They didn't know what the pump capacity was and stuff like that. So that's when you really start taking, not personal, not even ownership. You're just like, all right, they're my responsibility now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Take a lot of accountability for that.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. Everybody puts a lot of hard work in down at threes. I'm not taking away from anything that's down there, but you don't hear all the bitches and complaints until you're the officer down there. Then, yeah. And that even goes from shift to shift down there too. I think,
yeah.
You know? Yeah.
Yeah. You're talking about that, how when you were an officer, then you had a little more respect for when you were on the other side, kind of, you know, sending all the complaints up, and then you're an officer and you're like, yeah, you don't realize how much, you know, your umbrella, how much you catch.
Yeah. And even, you know, I can remember some specific situations with, so Rusty went to 7s and then he came back as captain on truck 3. And I don't remember exactly what year that was, but even in a double house too, you have 2 captains and 4 lieutenants. Mm-hmm. And so, you know, not questioning decisions, but maybe like, well, why didn't they take my input on this or whatever? You do realize the further up that you get that you can't take everybody's opinion. You're always going to make somebody happy and piss somebody off.
Yeah.
So if you're the one that's unhappy about it, then just realize there was a reason for the decisions. And I'm saying all this because I failed at all of this many times. Didn't learn my lesson very well sometimes, you know.
I say, what did you learn the most about teaching probies and you firefighters?
I think in hindsight, one of the biggest things is that these people coming on are adults. They're not, and treat them like adults, you know what I mean? Or try to most of the time. And with Pedersen, what I learned was you can't draw blood or leave a mark.
Nothing.
were my 2 rules there.
No physical evidence.
No. But we had a lot of good time. But I think, you know, through the antics and all that stuff too, that's what builds the camaraderie in the team as well. Not that you're trying to embarrass anybody. Not that you're trying to belittle them. You're just, like the old saying goes, if we're not giving you a hard time, then
there's something wrong.
There's something wrong,
yeah.
Kind of thing. You
Absolutely.
know what I mean? Yeah. If you're getting a hard time. Now, you know, yeah, there are times when it crosses the line and the officer needs to address that. And hopefully I did in those situations. But yeah, I don't know. You just, you try to set the tone for being serious and having fun in both ways. I don't know.
Absolutely.
I got the best of both worlds when you were down there because it was you and Denny on the truck when I started.
Yeah.
And then Kelleher took over like 6 months into our probation.
So what year was that?
14.
14, okay.
And I remember Denny, shout out to Denny because he's leaving soon.
Yeah, retires in 2 weeks.
It was like our first week on district, right?
Yeah.
And I think me and Jesse Smith was my partner, but one of us got something wrong when we were saying the route, and he'd be like, and throw a pencil down at the end of the table. Just stuff like that where you're looking back now, you're so appreciative of all the. It was constant though. You're like sitting there sweating without even doing anything, wondering what's going to happen next. But
and then it's always like when you're just like, well, you could go that way.
Yeah.
But.
Oh yeah. You got
It'll
there.
get
You're
you
like,
there.
yes, I got there. And they're like, well, you could go that way, I guess. But
Nobody else would, but
Guess you know where it's at.
when I made it there.
Yeah. When I first got down there too, Frank Fulton was driving Engine 3 at the time, so Assistant Chief Fulton was driving, so that was good. I think Paul Johnson was on the back, and I mean those two with their movie quotes, and all the time.
Gosh.
That was some pretty fun times.
That was good. Because Paul and I and Frank was driving with Headland, Al, Winkler. Winkler was the lieutenant for a few months and stuff. But yeah, that's so having those guys. When I came on in 02, the same thing. But yeah, the movie stuff was like it still is. I mean, it's still a thing.
I remember
You got to be able to keep up. Some people they don't. They just don't remember. They look at you like, and you're like, how do you not know what I'm saying?
We have to give assignments out now for movies because of the generations that are coming.
You almost
on now,
have to,
and
like, especially some of these EMS kids and stuff. They look at it, they have no clue, and you're like, I want to send them to their room. I want to say, don't go down to your cubicle. I don't even want to look at you right now. Give me 10 minutes, then you could come back. But I'm like, I don't get it.
there were some certain situations where my face might have got red, and I may have. You can't talk for the rest of the shift.
Well, let's talk about the Polish Hammer coming up a little bit. That's Ed's nickname is the Polish Hammer, and Devin, why don't you tell us why or where that nickname comes from?
I remember specifically the first time I saw it. We were out inspecting, and we were downtown. I won't name the business we were at, but the guy in the front was so over us coming in and charging us for the money and blah, blah, blah. And all you were saying the whole time was, listen, we're assigned to do this by the city. We do not get the money from this inspection. We're just here to make sure the place is safe. But he was cutting you off every sentence you were trying to get out, and started seeing a color change in Captain Voloshen. And Jesse hit me and goes, not good, And I'm like,
Jesse had a radar for
and he's
it,
like, and he goes, we'll wait outside. And he walks me outside, and I see what's being said, but I can't hear it. But I imagine I'm glad Jesse pulled me out of there. And you came out and said, "We'll just come back to this one some other day," and just started walking to the rig.
I do remember that was maybe a year or two into. I remember that day. I remember that business.
I do too. I'll never forget it.
We were like a year or two into charging for fire inspections, and this person was not happy about getting inspected by the government in the first place and now being charged for it.
Yeah.
I think that was too. I'll share a little secret here too. It was like we'd go out inspecting and they were like, well, I can't believe you guys are charging for this now. And, we may have shared some information that said, well, this is a council decision. Sorry. And then it came down. It's like, you will not be saying this is a council decision.
After that. The Polish Hammer, though. Huh?
Oh, that's really funny.
So Jesse gave
Lucky
me
to not be on the receiving end of that one.
Yeah.
Jesse said I'm not real bright, but I hit real hard. So that's why I called it. Jesse always said that he could make if he made the bottom of my ears turn red, he could, depending on the day, whether to turn it off or just
keep going.
Just keep going. Yeah.
I love it. I remember the day when I told you how the calendar works, and it was kind of like how I was looking at the calendar at Station 3, and it's color coded, so it was like yellow, or red, or green, or something. And I'm just like, hey, Ed, you know it makes a diagonal down? Like, you work like a Thursday, and then you work a Wednesday, and then you work a Tuesday. And he's like, I never realized that before. Hey, thanks, and walked away. I'm like, how do you not know that?
Oh my God.
Yeah.
This is so Benjamin.
Because these light bulbs would just go off in my head all the time for me about realizing and figuring things out.
How many years did he add onto your life?
That I would.
I think that's probably when I was like, oh, bless his heart.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. We are an equal opportunity employer.
Al Kinsey, when we'd be sitting at the kitchen table, the probies got their back to the TV, and Wheel of Fortune would be on, during dinner, and like 2 letters would be up, and it's not even close to being the amount of letters, and Ben would be like, oh, blueberry muffin. And Jesse would throw down his fork, and Al would just put his head down.
Oh no.
Yeah,
I was like, I can only help this guy so much. I can't.
I think I just didn't know any better for most of it, and that saved me. I just wasn't aware of if I was ever in hot water or cold water. Or
ignorance is bliss, is
just
it?
kind of just driving through a minefield and figured my way out at the end.
We always appreciated it. I remember. Do you remember we were in Hy-Vee getting groceries, and it was like your old hockey coach. Mm-hmm. I don't remember.
Jeff Gray.
Jeff
Gray.
Gray.
Yep.
And Ben said hi to him and stuff, and we were like, "Come on, Ben, let's go." And so he like pulled me aside. He was like, "Hey, Ben's a really good kid. Give him a break." All right?
He knew exactly what you were going.
So I don't know if I was like my face was red that day, or if he was just giving me a heads up.
That's fair.
I remember going to the store, and Jesse would even get you sometimes to start going in on it a little bit. But it'd be like you'd be picking out food, and Jesse'd be like, "Oh man, you're getting that," and he'd be like, "Before you knew any better, okay, is that a problem? Oh, I guess not.
I guess
you're cooking dinner."
Yeah.
Then you'd go to get dessert, and Edward, can you believe that he's picking that out? Edward, oh no, and you'd be like, what? You're like, I can't do anything right today, and you'd just be like, knowing you now, you're sitting around the corner, I can't believe it, laughing like. Going along with every little thing he did, it was fun. It was so much fun.
Yeah, I remember it was around Christmas time and it was snowing a lot. We were on Green Avenue and someone was trying to like start a fire in the basement. It didn't end up taking off. Cops found it and ended up calling us. I was driving and you and Jesse were in there and you're like, hey, go get the rig phone because you're going to call the fire marshal's office.
Oh, yeah.
So I were running out there, and first thing I did is I stepped on the air horn on your side because I was getting the rig phone. And you just see every house light start turning on because I stepped on it for a while, and then I stepped on it again. I look out there, and I see
it was late at night, too.
like 1 in the morning,
yeah.
And it's snow. It was like Christmas Eve, maybe, and I see you and Jesse standing out there shaking heads.
I remember that.
Yeah.
Joel Bertrand, I think, has a famous story about he finally put a styrofoam cup over the air horn, like he taped it over the top so his foot wouldn't hit it. And if he ever needed it, he could smash the styrofoam cup. And I don't remember if it was Assistant Chief Flynn or somebody because I had told him, I'm like, man, you got to watch that air horn. And then somebody was walking in front of the rig and he did it again. And so I think as Joel tells it, I was like, that's the last time you will blow the air horn. So then he did the styrofoam cup. So many good memories down at Threes. I mean, really, and from the young people that are going through it now and the young people that go through it in the future, just realize it's as much fun as it is stress for the people that work down there. So you get the good and you get the bad from the people that are working down there. So yeah. But it's a special place.
That's good. Any other advice you would give to anyone down, new firefighters?
We got 2 starting today. That just started today.
Yeah.
So
one saying that I've had through the years, I think maybe as a probationary, is probably just absorb everything you can and be a team player and keep a good attitude. If something is, and they teach all this at Threes. I see it with the probies that are on third shift now from being the engine company that backs up or abuts that Station 3 district. They're doing really good. And it's like if there's a wrapper on the floor, pick up the wrapper and clean the floor. Just things like that. But you guys teach all that. One saying that I've had through the years that I had to really teach myself is, it's good to be a critical thinker until it turns out you're just being critical. I think is the biggest thing,
That's very good.
Yeah.
I will say, for Ed too, and not just that, because coming out, you got promoted. We actually share a promotion.
Yeah, we do.
So I got my lieutenant at the same time. Ed got his captain. He came out to fours for a short stint and stuff. It was a change of pace and mindset and everything, and drove for Ed for just a month until I got moved over and stuff. But then. So Ed coming in, me as a new lieutenant, Ed is a new captain now, and coming and take it over and stuff. I will say that one thing which you do very well, I thought, is you have a way of talking to people, and and being honest and truthful, but where people you can criticize or give advice without somebody feeling offended. You know what I'm saying? You just have that way of, and I don't know if it's just your tone or your calm or your delivery, but some of the best advice, and it's something that for me to work on is you said to be a good listener, especially as an officer, is to really listen to what the guys are telling you and stuff, and take all that in. So things that as we go through our careers, we always take stuff from different mentors and people that we've had over us and stuff. And every captain that I've worked under, Teely, I always take the relationship building is the biggest thing. I've always kept that as my number one thing and stuff. But Ed, I always take this piece of that listening and being a listener. So now as a captain of my own station, and trying to listen to the guys and do some stuff, and then just have that. Try to just a little bit more just calm and slow things down and listen. So it's something that I think that you're a good teacher, as well as I think you're always learning yourself, but you're also still a good teacher at the same time. I
appreciate that.
Which is good. So
I want to reiterate again that I appreciate that very much, but generally the things that you get better at are things that you failed at before. Mm-hmm. So I like to talk. That's good. So, yeah. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I remember especially if it was like a long day or even a bad day, you'd always say, it's a good job. And that always stuck in my head. You'd say, we'd be driving somewhere and you'd say, it's a good job. It's a good job, guys. Yeah. And I remember when I was working on the ambulance, and I hadn't even spent 100 hours working for the fire department yet. And it was like one of the first busy shifts we had, and we had all the crazies were out, and it was a snowstorm and everything that went wrong. And it was when the ambulance just started up, and I was sitting there at the table, and I'm telling war stories from our 12-hour shift we ran at Station 1 the day before, right? But I was saying in a matter of this Castle on the Hill, and this person, they didn't need to go, and this was crazy, and it was the truck got stuck and all this stuff. And I remember you kind of got real serious with me, and you said, hey, those are our citizens. This is Sioux City. That's the reason you have a job. That's who pays your salary, and you never forget that. Yep. And that light went off almost immediately. No matter how waste of a time a 911 call can be, or serious it can be, these are the people of Sioux City, and I've always respected how much you care about the people of Sioux City and just the city in general. So.
I've carried that with me just from being on probation, working under you too.
I appreciate that.
Everyone's human. Everyone deserves to be treated the same way, no matter what they are or where they are. There's a reason they called us. So I try to portray that to our probies as well.
I appreciate it, but you guys have all been on the rig with me, so I do love this job. I really do, and I'm very thankful for it. Most of the time when I say it's a good job, it's because I'm giving myself a pep talk. You know what I mean? Yeah. But that, I don't know, we all need it. And yes. Yeah. So you've seen me blow up at plenty of people.
That's good. Let's talk about maybe some of your involvement with the union over the years.
Yeah.
Or when did you really get involved, and then what have you done forward through there?
Sure. My dad was the youngest of 8 kids, and both of his parents were immigrants to Sioux City from what is today is Belarus, I guess, and they came here. They didn't know each other when they came here. My grandfather died when my dad was 5. My dad was born in 1930, and so I never knew my grandfather, obviously. But anyways, all of those siblings, I think, worked in the packing houses at one time, and that's kind of why they came here. Mm-hmm. If I have I think my grandmother came in 1914, and she was 17 at the time, is what the story goes. I think, I don't remember. I still have her passport at home, and but most of it's in Russian, so you can't. I don't know, what it says really. So with that being said, I grew up blue collar in Sioux City, and knew the importance of work groups and unions mm-hmm. and labor and stuff like that. My dad, was a meat cutter. And I remember being a kid, his hands got so bad from holding on to a knife that he had to have surgery to remove carpal tunnel and stuff, and couldn't cut meat anymore in the packing house. And I just remember it being a real hardship, And then he went to cut meat in the grocery stores, but his hands started getting bad again. And so I think that's why I got involved with the union right away, is just because I came up from a blue blue collar background, and I didn't like our house wasn't like pro union kind of, that kind of stuff. I just remember that. I do remember going to like the union hall with my dad when he was going through his trials of not being able to cut meat anymore. And I don't remember if it was, I don't know why. I mean, I was probably 6, 7, 8 years old at the time. So when I got on the fire department, and I didn't know anything about the IFF or the AFL-CIO or anything like that. But when I got on the fire department, it really felt like you were part of a team, and that was the booster club. Does that make sense?
Sure. Yeah.
Yep.
And I still think that, like, the individuals that are attracted to the fire and police and EMS and things like that, they truly want to help people, and all those attributes. They like being on the street. They like working with their hands. They like helping people. They're competitive. They like the excitement, that adrenaline dump. It's all part of it, just like sports and other things, music as well too. So when I got on the fire department and I started learning about Local 7, at the time, the Local 7 meetings were out at Station 7. That was where we met.
Wow. I didn't know that.
Yeah. They
Old Station 7?
Old.
On Floyd or?
No, the Station
Or
7 that's
both
there
on
now.
Floyd?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So I think I feel like I started going to meetings right away. Just, they still did the thing where like we do now, where after they've been on for a month, as the bylaws say, then you can proposition them for membership and stuff. And really felt like I was part of the team then, as we all kind of know, And there was some really good leadership back then, and still is in Local 7. There always has been. And just enjoyed the camaraderie. I think, I always enjoy a good party, and the union throws several good parties.
Yes, they do. Yes, they do.
Yeah, so I got involved early on. I think, go back to 9/11, I think part of that, I was on the job for 4 years at that time, and the IFF had a lot to do with the help, the resources that they were getting there, and what the firefighters were going through as far as the health risks and things like that. So that meant a lot to me. I'm sure there was probably like some openings. I think the vice president's job had gone. There were several different people that had done it like for a year, and nobody really picked it up. I remember like Kelly Hansen, I think, had done it. And I don't remember. Anyways, there was an opportunity, and so Kugel pulled me aside and said, "Hey, would you think about being vice president?" And I wasn't. One of the first things that he did was send me to ALTS in Atlanta. ALTS is Affiliate Leadership Training Summit, I think, summit, like that.
Okay.
The IFF puts it on every year for young leaders. And went down there by myself. Also, right before that, I won't give you all the details about this, but there was a division of the unions in the state of Iowa between, like, there was no Iowa professional firefighters back then. There was like the small locals and the big locals.
Okay.
There were 8 large locals that didn't agree with what was going on, and so they went off and did their own thing. And I remember going to the Iowa State House during those times. We had our own lobbyist, and Harold Shaberger, the president at the time, did not like that Iowa was divided, and it actually kind of hamstrung some legislative efforts that would have benefited particularly paid firefighters. I don't remember exactly what it was, just we were kind of on different sides of the issue, the larger locals and the small locals. And Shapeberger stepped forward and said, you need to get together. And so we actually had a special convention down in West Des Moines at a hotel when we became one again. I mean, it was long ago.
Yeah.
I think the division maybe lasted 10, 15 years probably.
Okay.
Because when I got involved with the Iowa Professional Firefighters, there were people that still came up to me that said, we remember Grant Mears, we remember Vic Casey, and a lot of those names like that used to come down. So all of that was very impactful for me, being a part of that. and the reunification. And I remember going down to Alts, and I didn't even know what district Local 7 was with the IFF, and went to the bar of the hotel, and there are just so many firefighters there with the same issues and stuff. It was overpowering. It really was. I remember calling Kugel and the Atlanta firefighters were having an issue with staffing at the time. Mm-hmm. And so Shapeberger rallied like everybody. There was 1,200 people at this conference. And we met in the lobby of the hotel and marched through downtown Atlanta to City Hall.
Oh, cool.
And stood outside until the mayor came out and talked to the firefighters that were there. And I remember calling Kugel when we were walking down the street, marching towards City Hall in Atlanta. Like, you won't believe this. But it's just, and through going through all of that as well, comes with age too, seeing administrative and even city administrative side of things along with the union side of things. Remember being at I think it was when I was president, we were at a city council meeting here in Sioux City, and firefighters used to go to a lot more council meetings than they did now. It was probably at least once a year if there was especially IAP time, or not IAP, CIP time. Yep. Sorry. Yep. There were probably at least 4 to 6 of us in the audience when they were going to talk about the budgets or whatever. Probably under different city leadership, there was more angst at the time, I'm guessing, and now it's not that way. I feel very supported by the city government.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. So but anyways, Jim Clark was presenting part of the CIP. He was an assistant chief at the time, and he was talking about the great relationship that the fire department has with Local 7, and that still sticks with me too. So, yeah.
Awesome. And then when did the Voloshen sausage making company? when was that for? It?
Yeah, I researched it a little bit last year. My stories are so long. I'm sorry, guys. This podcast is going to be 3 hours long.
That's okay.
Good stories.
I'll try to give you the condensed version. So there were 2 Catholic churches. We have a union elections every year. For those of you in the audience that don't know about Local 7, we have in January, the first Wednesday and Thursday after our monthly meeting, we have our elections for office, for the e-board and the trustee spots. And at that, and then we have the elections at the door, we have a dinner, dignitaries come, and then we play some card games and stuff like that. It's kind of like the annual party, if you will. Traditionally at that party, there's always been sausage as one of the dishes. And through the years, before my time, there would be roast beef and chicken. It was at the Biltmore. That was before my time too. There were 2 churches by miles in. So what was referred to as Pollock Hill when I was growing up. That's where all my relatives grew up, and they would have poker nights at these churches for the Knights of Columbus or the men or whatever, and they would serve this sausage. My dad would always be like, oh yeah, they always serve the really salty sausage, so you drink more beer, so you spend more playing cards, or bingo or whatever it was. So when I came on the fire department, and so our family, my dad's family had their own sausage recipe that they made and stuff. And Jerry Vakulskis and Jeannie were on the fire department, and their family grew up in that same neighborhood.
Okay.
And their family went to St. Cashmere. My family was from St. Francis. My dad never really attended church, so but so I started helping Jerry and Jeannie and the group of us make the sausage, the smoker sausage. And we would go up to Mrs. Smith's house up on South Westcott there, and she had a big old block smoker. And Jerry would do all the work. I would just show up and drink beer.
Yeah, that's pretty much what everyone else does.
Yeah, exactly.
That's what I do.
So Jerry was getting ready to retire, and it might have been Lenny. I don't remember. Somebody came up to me and said, hey, would you be interested in continuing on the tradition and learn how to make sausage? So I went to Jerry. I think we might have went 1 year without it, maybe. I think what happened after Jerry retired, and Jerry graciously gave me the recipe, and I kind of had an idea of how to do it just from our family history and stuff. And so that's where Voloshen Sausage Company was.
So good.
I love it.
So good.
Yeah, it's always it's an event that everyone looks forward to every fall. It's got to be coming up here, Oktoberfest.
Yeah. So we, I like doing it in October just for the fun of it. And then we'll do it again in December. And there's going to be a new sausage king.
New sausage guy.
Yeah. Jack
New
Cassabaum.
big sausage in town. Jack Cassabaum.
Jack Cassabaum.
The jokes still abound. My wife never approved of the T-shirts. Lenny was going to try to get those on Amazon, but
poor Carol.
They didn't make it past the critique committee.
So
That's
good.
funny. I love it. So now you're the captain at Station 6. Been there for 2-3 years now?
Yeah, 2.5. I think it'll be 3 in. I spent 2 years at Station 4, and then it'll be 3 years in February. I think is when I got sent to 6.
Was that like a homecoming for you? Did it feel like that?
Yeah, yeah.
Coming back to the Morningside?
It did. You know, I remember going to that station as a kid. We had a couple of spots that we'd stop and get our bike tires filled, you know, just because we were pestering them or whatever.
Yeah.
There was on South Lakeport, just south of Morningside Avenue, it's like a laundromat and a nail salon now.
Yeah.
That was a gas station when I was a kid.
Okay.
So that was one spot that we go to, and then the fire station was the other.
And so when you made captain, was it kind of in the back of your mind you were hoping? Like, because Tim Wilson was working there.
Yeah.
And then he, knew he had a couple years left, and then...
It was. I did. I mean, that was... I knew the spot was going to be open. I liked fours. Great crews out there. And, the hazmat is... It gets a bad rap, but it's very interesting. Mm-hmm. And when you get into it, it really is. And it makes you a better firefighter understanding those things, even with the products of combustion and stuff. And Phil, you and I could talk about that for a while.
I mean, every fire we go to is a hazmat, technically.
Yeah, it really opens up your eyes. It really does. Yeah. And how big of responsibility that is for Sioux City. But I knew that the opportunity was there when Captain Wilson was retiring, and it was back home. So that's the spot I wanted to be.
Awesome.
Well, the lawn looks great.
Yeah.
When people don't drive over it. And
edges look good.
The edges look good. Yeah, it looks good. Seriously, that's that's probably my favorite firehouse, just because it's like a true firehouse.
It feels like a firehouse.
It's a house.
Yes.
It's like an old firehouse, and hasn't changed much.
Neighborhood firehouse.
The bay door, flipped kind of.
Yeah.
But other than that, they did a good job with that place.
Absolutely.
And you guys are doing a great job keeping it up. I worked an overtime shift like a month ago out there, and
Cool. Thank you.
Yeah, it's pretty nice. Just a one bay, one engine. Quarter, the quarters are so cool when they redid it and stuff.
And that
kept the original, like all that original woodwork and stuff in there, and
I'm so
a lot
proud
of
of
the
that
original
station.
elements.
that
Yeah,
neighborhood
it's really
still
cool.
like the older folks that live around there still anchor, like that's an anchor in that community, that its own community.
Still
kind of.
has the best big screen TV on the
Yeah,
on the
that's right.
department.
Go out
too,
and
right?
see it on
The
the big
front
screen.
porch.
Yep,
Yep.
the front porch.
The big screen, the programming has changed a little bit on the big screen.
It's got
Yeah,
louder.
that's
You got more motorcycles and loud mufflers going by.
Subwoofers. One of the first months I was out there, so I got out there like in February, and then the warm weather starts coming around, and I'm like, man, I do not remember Morningside Avenue being this loud. And this was probably not a good decision, but there was a car that pulled up over into the Sam's Mini Mart across the street, and he was there for probably 15-20 minutes with the subwoofer going, and I don't know why he was there, if he was conducting some type of business. I was not having the subwoofer, and I would think I was doing a report on the computer, and I could hear it inside the fire station. So I just went across the street, and I think I kind of scared him with my radio and my uniform, and I just asked, I was like, I can hear this in the building across the street. And he was like, I'm sorry.
Nice.
Yeah, that was probably not the best decision. But
No,
the mayor of
what you really
Morningside.
said was, do you know who I am? Do you know what I could do?
No.
Turn it off.
Yeah. I am super proud of that
Taps on
station.
the window.
though.
Yeah.
It's a beautiful station. So what's going on now, and what's in the future for you?
Well, I turned 55 in December, so obviously I've been starting a little bit of the planning of what's after this. And I don't know. I'll tell you a little bit of a funny story. I have a cousin in Chicago that worked for the National Transportation Safety Board, and she see, I think Pam might be like 59 or 60 now or something, and she just recently retired. She was a air crash investigator, and through the years would have a moment's notice, fly to somewhere to investigate a crash. And she told me, and I was asking her about, how did you know when to retire? Kind of the same thing, kind of like pension, and same type of like being on call, sleepless nights, that kind of stuff. And she was like, it's just kind of like when you get married, when you know it's the right person. So I went back to the station, and Jason Sponder always pimps me about when I'm going to retire. I think he's trying to get rid of me. But, and I was telling him that story, and I said, so I guess when I know, and he said, did you tell your cousin that some firefighters have been married 3 or 4 times?
That's a really
Gotta
good,
love him for that.
That's a good Jake
Yeah,
quote.
that is a
right there. I like
Jake
that.
quote.
If there was ever a Jake response, that'd be it right there.
Yeah. So what's coming up? I don't know. I mean, there's the old country song that says, if you want to hear God laugh, just tell him your plans.
Yes.
And whatever the Lord wills, we'll see what happens. But
You have talked about when you do retire, even maybe in some vacations, you want to try and do a lot of hiking, and you have a goal of doing part of the Appalachian Trail someday.
yeah, I excuse me. Like the Bozeman story that I told earlier. That was one of the. I've always enjoyed that, and not really growing up with it. I think when I moved to Indiana, Bloomington is in southern Indiana, so it's all limestone and trees and beautiful country, and got into it out there, the outdoor scene, and have fallen in love with it. So when Carol and I take vacations these days, it's not centered around hiking, but when we go somewhere, like last year we did Seattle, and so we got to go part way up Mount Rainier, and that was really neat.
That's one of my favorite areas.
Oh yeah,
You're a man after my heart, because I love mountains and music, and that's when I think of you outside of the fire department.
yeah.
So
Those are
I'm right there with you.
Music, I don't have any ability, but I sure have a love for it. Thankfully, my kids have some ability, so I get to live vicariously
Very
through
good.
them now. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, I dream of being able to hike the entire Appalachian Trail from Georgia to Maine. Can I do it? I don't know. I gotta.
You'll find out.
Yep. Yeah, I got to go out and spend an overnight on the trail first, just so you can see all of my hikes. Well, I don't know. We've done some tent camping, but not like trail camping. So, yeah.
You were joking about, Sponder saying, a lot of firemen are married 3-4 times.
Yeah.
Thankfully, you and Carol have only been married once, and, you have 2 kids. I think, like joking and serious, that's the divorce rate in the fire service is high, the divorce rate in the military is high. So I think, you're a good role model on how to keep it together. You want to talk about just, your family and managing the lifestyle, the schedule, and then,
Sure.
being a good husband, dad.
One thing
like
that I tell people when they come to the firehouse and they don't understand our schedule, and I say, well, 2/3 of my life is spent with that family and 1/3 of my life is spent with this family. Because it really breaks down like that when you think that the 24 on, 48 off stuff. As you guys all know, and people listening, I love a good party. And I think what's been a blessing for me is to have a wife that will go out and have a good time with me, but knows when to tell me, enough is enough. So I really do. And God's grace to listen to her when she says that. So, we got 2 kids. Let's see. Eddie is 23. Ella is 21. They both just graduated from Iowa State. They did not listen to me and my advice. I said, you can always retake a class, but you can't relive a party. They were smarter than I was. So they both just graduated and got a lot of endeavors going on. They both love music, so they're playing music now. And Ella was a fashion merchandising major. She works at I should say she's part owner of a coffee shop and coffee roasting business.
Oh, wow.
Shout out to Phil with his coffee stuff. Yeah,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, she worked with Coffee and Nosh for some summers, didn't she? Yeah?
she did.
Yeah.
I remember that because we loved that spot, and we'd run into her working.
Yeah, it's been a blessing for her. She went on the road with them doing Ragbri for a couple of years with Coffee and Nosh and loved it. I'm trying to think. Alex Paulson family here in town was kind of a mentor for her for that. And so when she was in school in Ames, Alex knew the guy. Alex had Nightingale Coffee.
Yeah, I was going to say Nightingale Coffee. That sounds familiar with that Paulson. That name with that was Nightingale. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Alex's dad, Tom Paulson, is a professor, Dr. Paulson at Morningside, that Morningside brought in to head up the agricultural program that they have. Great family. But anyways, Ella went to school down in Iowa State, and Alex knew the owner of this coffee shop called Morning Bell there, and put a good word in for Ella, and so she started working there. And the gentleman that owned that business, his wife was a research professor at Iowa State. He's from Rhode Island. They both were. He was a professor too, but he wasn't working at Iowa State. He had a coffee business in Rhode Island. He moved all of this stuff to Ames, in the years that they were there. Ella started working for him. Well, he and his wife got jobs at Texas A&M, and he didn't want to move all of his roasters, and it's a pretty established business there on Main Street in Ames. And so he went to his attorney and made it into an employee-owned co-op. Oh. And so 5 of the employees bought in.
That's cool.
That's so cool.
Yeah, that's really cool.
So she's busy doing that, doing some modeling. Because of her fashion degree, she's always been involved in that. If you know Ella, she's been carrying around lip gloss since she was like 2 years old. Eddie, my son, was an industrial design major at Iowa State, and another artistic kid. Really, a lot of talents there. Like I said, I live vicariously through him. So he is busy working at Jimmy John's in Ames, doing a good job. Just met his crew this past weekend. We were down there for the game, and applying for industrial design jobs through the Midwest. And looking for something, so
going wherever that takes him.
Yeah, absolutely. Big supporter.
Cool.
His senior project was building this like sound surround chair, so that's why when I walked in here, I'm like impressed by Baker's audio visual talents here, and that's Eddie's world. That's my son's world too. Yeah,
cool. Awesome.
So I think your question was like 15 minutes ago.
Oh yeah, I was trying to think where we're going from here. But,
sorry.
No, I just you guys are I remember
talking about him being
it's
role model.
Being a role model,
Yeah,
setting an example for like that
for
family of keeping it together,
Yes.
and doing that. Yeah, I mean, really though, I mean, if you look at it, I mean, it is you can. It's an unfortunate, I think, side effect and stuff, but it's always telling these guys, when they come on, we do a really good job, and I've said before, of teaching you how to be a firefighter, how to deal with going on bad calls, how to do EMS calls, how to catch a hydrant. We do a really, really good job of that. Where we lack is what that does to what it's going to do to your home life and your personal life and stuff. And it's different for guys coming on the job that are married already and kind of have a thing. And then all of a sudden now this new schedule starts and it's this 24/40. Or versus somebody that's a single guy coming on, and then, you meet somebody and bringing them in and they're with you since, the beginning of that. But then you start adding kids when kids are young, because, being on the job when having kids, the kids are always sick when you're at work, or the stuff always breaks. Like the worst things possible that could happen when you're not at home happen when you're not at home. And like I said, we do a really good job of teaching you everything on the job, but, we need to help build that. But it's people like you and, guys that have made it through their whole career and have stayed married and had families and have this, just a good moral compass, I guess, is a good way to that a young guy can look and be like, man, what does it take, or what's the secret, or how do you make it work, or how do you do it and not, and if somebody's struggling. So it's, guys need to be able to reach out and talk to some of these people, to some of the people that have been on for a long time and have made it work their whole career. Yeah.
Well, life happens for sure. You know what I mean, and a lot of things are going to be out of your control. And everybody's walk is a little bit different, I guess. It's just that compassion and empathy for each other, no matter where you're at, whether you're going through a divorce or whether you're not, or kids. Or one thing I was thinking about when you were talking about that is, with the team spirit of what we do, we're pretty good about like work hard, play hard.
Oh yeah.
It's just sometimes you can't play that hard.
Yeah.
And you have to, and I think that's just one important thing to remember. So.
Yeah. And I think big thing is communication too at home. And you champion your people, you champion your crews here, and our job and stuff, but you also need to remember to champion the people at home, because they're the ones, once this job is gone and you're retired from here, you walk away and that's it. It's the stories. It's sitting at a podcast and telling the stories about the guys that we worked with or that are long gone. That's what you become, but that your family's still there when you're done. So I mean, they still have to be put as the most important people. So.
Just try to think of what's important to you.
Mm-hmm.
And somebody that you can depend on, a spouse, girlfriend, boyfriend, whatever, that can refocus you, I think is really important too.
I got a refocuser at home as well.
Yeah, that's good.
Because
You need them.
my motto since the day I was born was, I'm not here for a long time, but I'm here for a good
time.
But it's helping to change that, perspective. Like you said, adding kids, that gives you a whole, because you wanted to be at every event outside of work, if you're involved.
Yeah.
But then you start realizing priority wise, you're like, I got that family and I got this family. I see that family enough already. I need to take the time I have with my own real family.
And we know Bailey's smarter than you are anyway. So.
Yeah. I wasn't going to do this on my own, that's for sure. I wasn't going to be able to.
That's right.
No.
Good stuff.
Yeah,
All
very
good stuff, yeah. I don't know. I just think we're so fortunate to have this position. And we all know it. Whatever job that you're doing, when you put on that uniform and you pull up in a red vehicle, people listen to you, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah. You hope you do the right thing. We don't always, but you hope that you do.
Excellent.
Yeah.
You were talking about, Carol reels you in. Did she? Was she happy about your Iowa City weekend a couple weekends ago?
She did get a few chuckles out of
Well,
it.
you went down there with Jesse Petterson.
Yeah.
He's the guy who got you in trouble.
Front page of Hawk Central.
Can't believe
Legendary.
it. He's a diehard Husker fan, but it's been so painful for him. I guess he made the switch.
That was one of those redirection moments for me as well, because I was gonna go with you guys, but then I realized I'm gone this weekend away from my family. I'm gone next weekend. I got to pick and choose them now.
I remember running into hey, you in? He's like, no way.
No way. I so desperately wish.
It took me a couple days to recover from that, I'll be honest. I mean, I stayed out with them.
Yeah.
I don't know what time we came home.
Someone brought a 20 count pail of fireball shooters. They were a bad influence all weekend. I don't know who that was. You got me my buddy Andy, who's always a riot. You guys hit it off.
I had to bring some snacks.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, we all go down there. My buddy Andy's got like a Walmart bag with a toothbrush and a stick of deodorant. I brought some like leftover beer from vacation, and Ed went to Sam's Club and just cleaned the place
That's right,
out.
baby.
Yeah.
We had snacks, meals.
You get fresh.
Anything and everything.
And then it was like a ripple in the matrix that morning, I think, because I mean, we went to Sci-Fest,
Fry
Fest
Fest
the night before, and it was a good band, and I mean, we played some bangers on the way home with the Uber driver. Annie was taking over the Bluetooth from the Uber driver, but she was a really good sport.
Uh-huh.
She loved us so much that she drove around the hotel parking lot twice because we were playing music before she dropped us.
Oh, that's
awesome.
So we might have been a little tired, but our goal was to be out of the hotel by 8. No, our goal was to be out of the hotel by 7 and be tailgating by 8 for an 11 o'clock game. And we were pulling out of the hotel at 7:52. I was
Did really well.
Pretty proud of us. So, and the tickets that we had were season ticket holder tickets. And so the parking pass we had was in this lot of other season ticket holders. So you can imagine there's these big, fancy tailgates going on, nice cars, beautiful tents, and the 5 of us pull up in Ben's Tacoma with 2 coolers.
Yeah, baby.
And we weren't there for like maybe 10, 15 minutes. I think I just poured a Bloody Mary, and this girl comes up to us, and she's like, hey, I'm with the Des Moines Register. Do you mind if we take your picture? And we're like, all right, absolutely. We want our picture. And so, a couple of us stood up. They were sitting down, and I didn't even know Ben was doing the Heisman pose. I don't think he knew either.
No, I didn't. I was falling over.
That's what that was supposed to be with the Heisman.
I was trying to. I had it up, and then I
figure
kind
out
of
what
like
he
lost
was
my
trying to
footing.
do there. That was,
So I think she caught me like mid-fall. It wasn't a very good pose.
We'll have to,
great.
Baker, you have to overlay that picture of that. Yeah, when we upload the video.
And then she was like, okay, thanks. And she pulled her phone out like a microphone, and she was like, can you say and spell your name in case we publish this photo? And without missing a beat, Jesse Pedersen, Jesse.
Doesn't even think about
I
it.
wasn't even
perfect.
thinking about it.
It was fun.
Then we're sitting in the game later, and Ben's buddy texts him that sees the picture, and he was like, "What are you doing on the Hawk Central cover page?" And
I
it's
couldn't
Jesse
believe it.
Pedersen.
Yeah.
That was that was the cherry on top to a fun weekend.
Captain Johnson and I saw that. You sent it to me.
Yes.
And I'm like, this kid's asking for
He's gonna die.
death. That's what I said. I think.
I didn't even
This guy's got a death
I,
wish.
it's like
Jesse,
I
what
read
are you
through this
doing?
because I read through the caption first. I was like, oh, it's like Chet Pedersen's there, but he's not in the picture. I went, wait a minute, Pedersen doesn't like the Hawkeyes. I'm like, I went, and then all of a sudden it was just like the light bulb went off. I went, oh my God, Moorhead is
Someone's
just a
dead.
genius. He's so good.
Way
Like
to go,
just
buddy.
that's such a Moorhead move, just like Jess Pedersen. Oh, so
good
good,
time.
so good.
Someone had to do it. Good
Yeah.
for you.
Yep.
Yeah, that's awesome.
So yeah, we'll see if my lawn furniture might be on my roof when I get home, or who knows.
It's all good.
Bucket of snakes in my basement.
Yeah.
No, that won't.
It
happen.
will not.
He
He
won't
won't
go.
touch him.
No, he won't.
He won't go next to him. Yeah.
Before, like, even we wrap up and we let things go, so there is one thing that we need from Ed. Besides, he's dropped some knowledge bombs on us and some different things, but Ed kind of does a thing before the morning meetings all the time on the
my
teams
goodness.
meetings and stuff. Well, you can't get away without one of Ed's dad jokes. I mean, that's like not a.
Wow.
That's like a pretty much it puts you on the spot, right? Like any other morning, you're like he's just rattles them off, but you put him on the spot and it's like just blank. But yeah.
For sure, I use my phone for most of these. I just pick whatever we have.
Right.
The other day, I think the one was we had a hydraulics class that day, and so I'm like before a morning meeting, I'm like, okay, pumping. So I just looked up pumping dad jokes. I'm giving away my secrets now. And one of the first ones that came up was about when I was a kid, I could go to the gas station and get air for free. Now it costs 25 cents. Damn inflation.
That was actually really good. I like that.
So I don't know. Jerry Bennett, I had him as I was mentioning, and he liked the irony and the dad jokes and all that kind of stuff, the sarcasm. I think it's just a good way to lighten up the mood. Probably when I do it, it's because of maybe nervousness or something.
No, I was always like every morning. And some of them were pretty good. Some of them were like, whew, that's like even for Ed's like jokes. It was like they'd be kind of a stretch.
Like you said, it puts a smile on everyone's face in the morning meeting. Like, you could see whether they absolutely hate it or
you almost expect it now. It's like,
Yeah.
come on.
Sometimes they're appropriate, sometimes they're not. Sometimes you just got to figure it out if they're not or not.
Yeah.
Or Lieutenant Fox will
I'd
say,
say-
"What do you got for me, Ed?"
Yeah,
That's
he
so
sees
funny
me
to see
smiling.
that.
Yeah.
Tell a joke so funny, HR wants to hear it. That's how you know if it's inappropriate.
Yeah.
That's good.
Did you hear about Little Dirty Johnny? No, I'm just kidding.
No, little Johnny stories.
Awesome. Well, Cap, thanks for coming out. To anything else you wanna add?
No, I was sitting here in my mind thinking about all the influences and mentors and stuff that I've had, coworkers and officers and city council members and all that. I just want to say thank you. Thank you to you guys for doing the podcast, and what a great addition to our Sioux City family.
Yeah. Thanks for coming on. We appreciate you doing it, and we love hearing the stories. Hopefully, we get some more people.
You'll probably hear them another couple times before I retire.
That's okay.
Count on it.
All right.
All right. Thanks, Cap. Ryan, go ahead and wrap it up. Drop tones for us.
Drop them.
All right. Cheers. Oh yeah, baby.